Finding common ground between two sides is challenging, if not sometimes impossible. So establishing trust, it's a fragile process. Ukraine and Russia appear to be closer on some of those elements. Can it last? Will it actually get over the finish line? Igor Novikov is back with us tonight from Kyiv. He's a former advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Igor, peace talks are underway. The terms are finally being articulated. Ukraine says it wants assurances of military assistance from the U.S., from the U.K., from China. Does that mean weapons or does that mean troops?
Well, I mean, it remains to be seen because I'm not one of the negotiators, but if I had to make an educated guess, I would say it's weapons first. If we learned anything during this conflict, during this war, is that our army is more than capable of pushing back Russia. It's just a question of hardware they're using. So I think it's weapons, mainly weapons and closing down Sky. Those are two crucial elements.
So not trying to get everybody involved with troops on the ground, but the assurance request, it's the West, I noticed, plus China. I don't know if that's conceived of like a NATO plus deal or if it's a scaled back version, but is that a shoot for the moon scenario, knowing the final package would be more modest, or do you think that's actually within reach?
Well, to be honest, it remains to be seen where this war is going to lead in terms of its global ripple effects. I mean, I don't think we're anywhere close to the end of this war. So I think our delegation isn't shooting for the moon. It's actually stating the obvious. I mean, if Ukraine geographically is to be a neutral country, and Russia's not going to go away anytime soon. So we need assurances not only from NATO that could be used against us, but from the global community as a whole. I think that's more of a balancing act. Whether that's going to materialize, I'm skeptical at the moment, to be honest. I think what's going to happen, if I had to guess, I'd say Russia is stalling at the moment and using, these negotiations with two main objectives. First of all, to showcase to the West that, it wants peace and diplomacy, but basically, lying. The other one is they need a narrative to explain their losses, especially around Kiev, to their domestic audience. I think these negotiations are a way for them to announce, the end of what they call phase one.
And if people think you're maybe being too cynical about the intentions of Russia, it's worth pointing out you and I were talking, and during a ceasefire or a drawdown of sorts, you said it's been louder today than ever. So with the bombs and all of this. So when President Zelenskyy was asked by The Economist recently, what does the future of the country look like? He said this.
Я думаю, що в його розумі Україна, яку бачимо ми, він її не бачить. Це так. Він бачить Україну як частину свого світу, свого світогляду.
And of course, he's talking about Vladimir Putin. He sees Ukraine differently than maybe the world sees Ukraine. Igor, is the Donbas region up for negotiation, not giving it to Russia, but just setting it free, letting it be independent?
Well, look, I mean, if you're asking for my personal opinion, I think, in the 21st century, certain things should be more relaxed. So if people want to live in their own country and, there's a free and democratic process to kind of ensure that, that's absolutely doable. But the problem is here with Russia is that there is no free democratic process to kind of, for the people to decide their future. I mean, Donetsk is a great example of that because, look, first of all, people of Donetsk are suffering a lot, and they're suffering from Russia on both sides. So Russia is, is shooting at Donetsk and, making sure the situation is terrible, then blames on Ukraine and attacks Ukraine. That's the way, it's been happening over the last 8 years mainly, and, that's what we're seeing everywhere in Ukraine. So I think, look, it's a question of survival for Ukraine, so I think we should not compromise on our territorial integrity and sovereignty.
One more thing I wanted to ask you about here. My guest on the show last night, Ben Schmidt, he's at Harvard, he explained in 2019, Ukraine enshrined the pursuit of NATO and EU membership into the Constitution. That's a lot more serious than I think a lot of us realize. So if a deal, let's say, is reached with Russia on something like NATO, can that be repealed quickly enough?
Well, first of all, what needs to happen according to the current Ukrainian legislation before there can be a referendum, which is the quickest way of doing it, there needs to be the end of martial law. And for the martial law to end, you need Russia to withdraw all its forces to at least the positions that they held before February 24th. So it's not going to happen the way Russia proposed it happened with the Steinmeier formula, for example, in Donbass. So if you remember correctly, I mean, what Russia wanted in Donbass was for people of Donetsk and, the region to hold the elections, and only after those elections, Russia would hand over the control of the border back to Ukraine. Therefore, Russia was insisting that, they use their forces on the ground to ensure the outcome of those elections. And, Ukraine was arguing with Russia. That was the main, the main point of all the negotiations that were going on. Now that is impossible as far as NATO is concerned, because, in order to change our constitution, in order to hold a referendum, there needs to be an end to hostilities. Otherwise, it's legally impossible. And I don't think President Zelenskyy or his team or the people of Ukraine are going to be okay with bending a law here or breaking a law.
I see. That's really good information, that even if these concessions were on the table, they can't be done at gunpoint. Igor Novikov, thank you so much for coming back again tonight. I'm glad that you and your family are safe. We pray for the rest of the nation as well. Thank you.
Thank you.